Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020, 9:30 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Of course, it's Wednesday, so it's campaign discussion day. And we are going to pick up where we left off last week. We were into the 1E, the first edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide, Appendix C. And we were going through the random encounter tables, and we left off before the final section of that on city/town encounters. And I would like to pick up where we left off with those because I think they're useful. Where are we at with this? 1 DMG. We should slip that behind. That way when I open up this, it's all good. It's all good. There it is. So yeah, see how we kind of went over them rather quickly. The waterborne encounters, we sort of cherry picked some names out of those, but those are mainly tables. There's a little section on talks a little, just briefly, about small bodies of water versus a large body of water. Salt water, of course, has different um, types of creatures from freshwater. Airborne, there's like one little paragraph, and we mentioned that. Outdoor random encounter monster tables, you use the appropriate ones for the terrain that is beneath the airborne encounter. So that's all really good. Easy to do. But where we stopped was with city/town encounters. And I thought, we'll do a whole thing on those because it's worth it. I did want to mention, though, it's the 23rd of September. And although we started this show on Thursday, the 26th of March, which would have been the first day of physical GaryCon, and we've been doing the show daily since then. A few shows we've actually done, a few days we've actually done more than one show. We would do an additional show in the afternoon or the evening. I was messing around with the format. I was trying different things, so it behooved me to spend a little more time on it than I do now that it's up and running regular. And I'm going to slide this over just a skosh. There we go. So it started up 3 days after the store closed. Monday was the last day that the store was open before the C-19 pandemic shutdown. We had done a few weeks of extra vigorous cleaning, as there were rules then that you could stay open a little bit or use your best discretion. Hey, how's it doing? How's it going? Oh, subscribing. Thank you. That's very kind of you. We've got Carlos here with George in the chat. The the struggle was real. It was difficult. Some people weren't taking the whole pandemic thing very seriously, and they were coming in anyway. And we got to a point where, and I mean, Jason's call. He owns the store, but I backed him on all this, so it's not. I'm not throwing him under the bus. I agreed with the policies that we discussed and then implemented. But it was ultimately his call to make. So I'm not saying that I got to dictate any of this, and he did not dictate. He discussed things with me before making his decisions. But it's his money on the line, and it has to be his decision. He has to feel comfortable with whatever the decisions were, not just financially, but excuse me, for the sake of his family. He's got 2 young sons and a wife to consider. And his wife, who runs an audiology business, has to consider all of her clients and her employees too. And a lot of her clients, audiology, that's a lot of hearing aids. There's a lot of older customers, older clientele. So, you're talking about a lot of high risk individuals that are then part of the contact tree if anything should happen at the game store that, you know, ripples across to her business as well. So there was no real tough decision. It was just how fast we came to that decision based off of data that we had at the time. No, we don't. Alex Fire is asking, hey, Nomad. Alex Fire is asking if the store all online right now, and no, Jason has spent some time upgrading the online store, but it's not open for sales. Part of the problem with that is, so there's this idea: do we kind of half-ass it with the store? Do we employ people and try to bring some money in? And we looked at all the overhead combinations and the the rent and bills that are monthly, insurance, electricity, all of that stuff added up are only about a third of what our overhead is if we're trying to staff up and be open. And for the online store to be open, there is the constant keeping up with prices. That alone is half of a full-time job every week. It's just staying on top of everything that's going on, not just in new product, but in secondary market, is very time-consuming. So when we're open and I'm managing the place, a large part of my time is taken up dealing with keeping up-to-date prices and ordering and receiving orders, and of course, sales, running events. Without the ability to run events, without being able to pack 8 people together around a table and have them hand stuff to each other and talk to each other and put particles into the air for 3.5 hours in an enclosed environment, which, I'm sure when you think about it that way, you realize you just can't do this responsibly right now. It's all well and good to say, well, you can separate people and sit them apart. Well, if you're drafting, and if you're playing a EDH game or whatever, you're right across, even if you're playing one-on-one. And board games, certainly, you're sitting around a table all right next to each other. RPGs, D&D, whatever, you can't be... You're not going to run a game with people sitting 6 feet apart from each other, And then even if you could do that, you're still in an enclosed room. I get that restaurants do similar when they're open, but people have to eat. There are certain people don't have to play games. And let's also remember, too, that for the most part, that sort of environment is meant to be open for people that are coming together. People that are already living together at home are not risking any more for themselves necessarily from each other being together at another location. What that does for other people when one group gets together at a table and another group gets together at a table and they're sitting near each other, even if they're 6 or 10 or 12 feet, if there's a vent blowing air across, then anything they're coughing and is getting, So there are considerations that we have to consider as a game store. And if we can't open, and from what I understand, very few places that are trying to run events game store wise, from what I've been keeping an eye on, very few places are having any success drawing people out anyway. Since that staffing up causes us to increase our overhead by 3 to 3.5 times, we would have to be making a ton of business, which just is not available without our game room being open. People pop by and grab a board game. Well, maybe, board game here, board game there, box of Magic here, box of Magic there. Probably some singles too, and maybe we'd sell some more online as well. But there's no way, the projections just suggest that there's no way that we would be doing enough business to cover what we would need to cover. We would be losing more money being open than we would be being closed. And I don't want it to sound like that's the financial situation that we would allow to guide us. But in part, we have to think that way because if we're going to be open for the community down the line, we have to lose less money now. We can stay open quite a long time just paying that small chunk of overhead to be closed, and essentially think of the game store as a somewhat expensive storage facility until we can get back open. That's kind of how we have to think of the place for now. And hopefully won't be that much longer, but this is a milestone today. It is 6 months to the day since the last day the store was open. We closed on this day. Jason and I were there. We took care of a few things. We took the more expensive things and secreted them away off-site at a more secure facility, since we weren't going to be there to check up on the place all the time. And we shut it down. So it will have to stay that way, and we can't do online sales unless we staff up considerably just to keep up with shifting secondary market prices to buy and receive goods and then to ship them out. All of that is a full-time job right there. Just that aspect of the business would be a full-time job. And I don't mind telling you, I'm pretty expensive. And I'm worth every penny. So let's just say that the numbers don't bear out doing anything but staying closed right now. And when we get to the other side of this, and we can open up fully and embrace having tables open and safely invite people back into the space, then that is what we will do, and we will love having that, because I guess I probably don't need to tell you, some folks, they'll game once or twice a week or whatever, and they consider themselves, oh, I play every week, and I play twice a week or 3 times a week, and I'm a gamer. Guys like me, we're gamers 7 days a week. I do this show 7 days a week because I miss gaming that much. I game, prior to the pandemic, I've been gaming since, started gaming in the early 70s, playing hex and chit board games and miniature war games like Chainmail added D&D in 74, and I played through all the editions, tons of other RPGs. I added Magic the Gathering and board games, and constantly. I'm just a lifelong, full-time gamer, right? Board game here locally a couple of times a week by schedule, and then try to run a campaign weekly, a D&D campaign. And then I get into magic events, both at the store and sometime if I'm off, I'll run over to the next town over, or next town up, or up around Milwaukee or Janesville or down into northern Illinois and play in a Friday night magic event down there if Jesse's running things at the store. So, not just to see what they're up to. I'm not there as a spy. I'm there because I enjoy playing games, and it's fun to play against people I don't know and to test my mettle against others with decks I built, or to draft and just see if I can draft well and experience. I especially do that when it's a newer set because I've analyzed it and stuff as the spoilers were coming out, and then when that new set is dropped and people are just starting to get used to it and hasn't all been figured out yet. It's a puzzle that has not yet been put together by anybody, right? Except maybe playtesters. And even then, they don't know everything, right? So it's just such a blast. Just such a blast. And that makes me pretty much a full-time gamer. So to those of you who wish you could come to the store and pick up some stuff or play a game or whatever, and it's your one, and maybe it's more precious for you. Maybe when you only get to do it once or twice a week, tops, or a couple of times a month, it actually hurts more, right? To miss it because it's so rare relative to someone who's immersed in it every day. But this is what I'm doing as a show. And we're talking about city and town encounters. Boy, did I ramble on for half of the time today, huh? Magic is one game I just never got into, I'm afraid. It's fascinating. I'll tell you, it's like almost every game we play. It's just another way of teaching us math while disguising it underneath a theme. I tell you, war games. Grew up playing war games. I learned about math and geography and history. I got away from real world war games, even miniatures games. I didn't play anything post gunpowder. Everything was medievals or ancients. Probably starting in the mid '80s. One of the advantages of that was any miniatures that I singly based for miniature games, miniature war games, and I did gravitate toward games that had single based miniatures rather than units, where several miniatures were on the same base, because I could, and I stayed in 28 millimeter, well 25 we called it back then, right? But scale creep and all, 32s now. I stayed with those because I could use the miniatures in my other games, in my RPGs. It didn't matter if these spear-wielding, tower shield Romans were guards in my medieval game. I mean, they were representative. They worked, and it was great. And speaking of cities and towns, the prime city, or cities/towns or towns in a campaign will usually have predetermined denizens, and many encounters will be set according to facts thus developed. All sections of these prime inhabited areas will not be matrixed, and all other cities, towns will be basically undeveloped. For all such areas, the city-town encounter matrix is useful. All encounters must be in their appropriate areas. A ghost will not be encountered in the main square of a city, rats in a palace, etc. If the role indicates an improbable encounter, just ignore it, and no encounter has taken place. Check for encounters every 3 turns as normal or otherwise as desired. So one obviously good advice, just ignore. Alternately, one could re-roll. It's interesting to say ignore rather than re-roll, I think, and I'm commenting on this. Beautiful art, cool concepts, and awesome flavor text just never grabbed me. Yeah, for Magic, sure. Probably because when it was coming out, 93, I was in college and too dead broke to buy packs. Yeah, I hear you. Great review of 1E D&D Appendix section. Good reminder for current campaign. Yeah, no doubt. Thanks, George. It's true. It's some of this 1E stuff is generic, not generic, universal, I guess is a better way to put it. The comment I wanted to make, though, about this idea of just ignoring rolls that seem improbable in your campaign rather than re-rolling them. We were talking last week about how balance is baked into a lot of these tables. There's an example there of how it's hard to see if there is a sense of balance to it. Because if you decide that a certain number of encounters should happen over a certain period of time in a certain type of area based on the number of people that might be encountered in such an area, then you have to understand that tables, if I roll a die, I have to decide how often, how many pips on that die can show up that will indicate there's an encounter. So there's a percentage chance of an encounter happening. If I then say on the back end that if you think a result that you rolled on the matrix, on the city-town encounter matrix, is improbable for the section of town you're in based on the way you've built your town. It says lizardmen in my town isn't anywhere near the world where lizardmen exist, and it's full of humans. They'd stand right out. They wouldn't. There's no way. So I'm just ignoring the lizardmen rather than re-rolling it, because now I've kind of countered that first roll for whether or not there should be an encounter in the first place. If there's a percentage baked into that, isn't there an encounter, and then when I roll the encounter I just drop the results and ignore them, then I've changed that first percentage. So one of two things is in evidence there. One is that they've assumed a certain probability of encounters that will be ignored and figured that into the original percentage, or they just don't care. They don't need balance to be that tight. They don't need you specifically to run into a certain statistical percentage of random encounters in cities, in this and that, wherever. So, without being able to ask, Gary's not with us anymore to interview in this regard, but I feel fairly confident in saying he didn't feel it really mattered. If you can ignore an encounter as a GM, the advice throughout all of first edition D&D was always use your best judgment. You decide. If you feel, after rolling up several encounters and finding all of them improbable and in need of being just dropped or ignored, then certainly as a thinking human being, you can just say, I'm just going to roll another one this time. We keep getting ignored results. I'm just going to roll another one. And if it's a ignore result again, I'm going to take 10% off, or I'm going to just automatically do the human subtable, and we'll see where that gets us, because that's most likely encounter anyway. Blah, blah, blah. Always worth thinking about things in that regard. All encounters must be in their appropriate area, so we read that section. Disguise all encounters by using vagueness and similarity. So that is a fascinating, seemingly counterintuitive phrase. Let's read that one more time. Disguise all encounters by using vagueness or similarity. So, when you see someone coming around a corner, is it better for them to have a cowled hood so you can't tell who it is? Absolutely. Do we want everybody like that? No, not at all. Is it better when a cart comes rolling down the street if all of the individuals on the cart look like merchants? Sure, those fit in. That's not going to surprise anybody. But turns out they're a press gang grabbing up stray humans to put them on a pirate ship. All the better, right? So if we roll up pirates, for instance, on a table, and they don't have pirates on here, but we could just as easily say if we roll up bandits, or probably more appropriate, brigands, and we're in a town and there's a port town here. They could be pirates that have come ashore, and of course they're looking for more crewmen to bolster their numbers after having lost some in their last fight with the Kraken. So there you go. So we've got all of these wonderful encounters, doppelgangers. Got to disguise that with vagueness and similarity, right? I love routing doppelgangers. Such fun. He looks like the mayor. Doppelgangers are pretty smart, though, and of course they can peep inside your noggin, so there's a good chance they're going to can use diversion, says George. Absolutely, buddy. Gary Gygax and I said, I am often staggered by the fact that more people don't name him when we speak of true American geniuses. No doubt. He and his little game shook the foundations of the world and let countless dreamers' imaginations take flight. That is so true, Carlos. So true. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. When they do the biopic, dear God, consider hiring Paul Giamatti to play him. George says, can use diversions. That NPC that offers help can sell out the players to the highest bidder. Yeah, vagueness and similarities can include trickery, right? Somebody who's not what they appear to be, someone who appears as a friend, and then, as you say, sells you out to the highest bidder. Absolutely. And you can go through this section on your own, of course, but it details individuals that are on this list: assassin, bandit, beggar, brigand, city official, so on and so forth. We've got assassins, bandit, beggars, brigands, quick little thing because they're in the monster manual, right? City guards, gives some details to make it easier depending on the size of the city. How many higher level leaders do you want amongst them? City officials, talks a little bit about different titles they might have and what those duties they might be on the way to perform. City watch, a little less potent than the guard, right? Clerics, demons, devils, they can show up. Should be rare, but they can. Doppelgangers, druids, drunks. It's a drunk, but what is he normally? Is he a drunk illusionist? A drunk thief? A drunk merchant or tradesman? Good stuff to know, because you help him get home, maybe he owes you a favor, right? Fighters, a gentleman. Is he a foppish dandy or a sycophant? Possibly a gentlewoman. A woman who is in business for herself as a cobbler. And you run into her and help her out. Maybe you get some new boots at a discount, right? Guest, ghost, ghouls, giant rats, good wife. All right. with a single woman, often indistinguishable from any other type of female. Okay, harlots, we'll skip the harlots. Illusionists, laborers, magic user, mercenary, merchants. That's an important thing to deal with in towns, of course. Monks, not going to happen in my campaign. Night hag. Oh boy. Tricky, tricky. There's our buddy. Emrakul. Riding through the land. They're not socially distancing. That doesn't seem right. We get down to the next part here. We've got race. Oh, we kind of skipped because there's another hole. Here, we'll go back up just real quick. Is that where we left off? Yeah, no. Will-o-wisp, wights, werewolves, were-rats. Lots of were creatures because during the day, of course, they're just normal people. And then during the full moon or at night, depending on how you run lycanthropy, because that can be run any number of ways. He's just popping off left and right, that guy. What's wrong with him? Encounters are treated the same. Wraith encounters are treated the same as ghost encounters, except that 1 to 4 wraiths can be encountered. Vampires? Oh, yeah. Magic possessed by encountered creatures. I'm going to show this whole table here because we've got... Here, we'll widen it out anyway. Magic's possessed... based off of character class type. There are percentages. We got a roll for possible ring of protection, bracers, cloak of protections. All of that stuff is possible in regular creatures. We won't go into Appendix D. I think we're done for the day. But there's no reason why there can't be some treasures, some magic items, maybe a coin purse, throw a map on there to a location you've been trying to flesh out and you want to share with the players, or at least, give them the option, right? If they don't want to, force people into a dungeon, but you let them know the dungeon's there, they'll go if they want. You don't have to force them to go. In fact, if you try to force them to go, they won't go. It's just how it works with players. Get used to that if you're new. Anywho, I want to thank everybody. I very much appreciate you coming around today and visiting on the OK Grognard Show. I will say, come on back. We've got shows every day, 9:30 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Hey, if you're around tomorrow at 9:30, you know what we got. GMing tips. I know we gave a few away today, so maybe that was just a prelude. Building adventures on Friday. GM reviews on Saturday. Rules retrospective on Sunday. Weekly news and announcements on Monday. Cartography and world building on Tuesday. Then back around the horn to campaign discussion next Wednesday. If you're following us on YouTube, please do subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Maybe make a comment. Some constructive criticism is always welcome. This has been show 195. Like I said, we have had half a year, and in that time, there have been a number of days where we did a couple of shows. So now we're just down to one a day, and that's plenty for me. But I want to say, if this is 195, that means next Monday will be our 200th show. So we should probably do something special next Monday. I'll have to figure out what that's going to be. It'll be exciting. We'll have announcements. We'll have a one-day special giveaway. Make sure to mention it to everybody that it's going to be a big, big show, baby. Thanks for jumping in the channel here while I've got the live show going on. And do me a favor. Follow the channel if you haven't already. If you're lurking out there and you want to join in the fun. Definitely, if you're following and you're here during the stream, pop into the stream chat and say hello, because we will add you into our little list of non-bot followers of the channel, and that will get you on the possibility of being included in the drawing. So thanks again. We're well over time, so I'm just going to say thank you, and bye-bye.